No one remembered when the bell first started ringing. It was just there. At 3:07 a.m. every night, the sound rolled over the hills like slow thunder from a storm that never arrived. It wasn't loud enough to wake the town, but it was deep enough to feel in your chest, in the windows, in the bones of the houses that hadn't been painted since the last war. The strange part wasn't the sound itself. It was that there was no church. There hadn't been one for decades. The old church on Pine Hill had burned down in 1984. Lightning strike, they said. A bad summer for rain, a worse one for power lines. The ground where it stood was now just wild grass, a few bricks, and a wooden sign split in half that still read, "St-A-G before the rot outeth the rest." People in Ashbrook stopped talking about it after the first year. The sound became part of the night, like crickets or trains, something too familiar to question. If you asked anyone where it came from, they'd shrug. Probably the next town over, they'd say. Sound carries in the valley. But the next town over never heard it. And then one night, Anna Reed did what no one else bothered to do. She tried to find it. Anna was the type of person small towns create when they get too quiet, curious in a way that feels like trouble. She'd moved back after her father's stroke, taking over the gas station that smelled like oil and coffee, the kind of smell that sticks to you even after you shower. Her apartment above the station had one window that faced the empty hills. She could hear the bell clearer from there than anywhere else. The night she decided to follow it, rain had been falling for hours, thin, steady, mean. The kind that doesn't wash anything clean. The bell started at 3:07, same as always. One low chime that lingered too long. She checked her watch. 7, then again, 3:08, and again, 3:09, each chime exactly 56 seconds apart. She grabbed her flashlight, keys, jacket, and told herself it was just sound, just air and distance, just curiosity. But curiosity in Ashbrook had always been a bad investment. By the time she drove past the last streetlight, the road was pure darkness. No fog at first, then too much. The bell grew louder, but never nearer. It came from everywhere and nowhere, like it was inside the fog itself. At 3:13, the sound changed. It echoed twice, once low, once high like a reply. Anna slowed the truck. The rain stopped mid-drop, not faded, stopped. Every raindrop in her headlights hung suspended like glass. Then the bell rang again, and the drops fell all at once, hard and angry. The road ended at the old cemetery. Everyone knew that place was closed off years ago. The city never fixed the fence because no one visited anyone buried there anymore. Her headlights cut through the iron gates, and that's when she saw it, a tower, not a building, just a tower. It rose from the center of the graveyard, made of old wood and stone that didn't belong to each other. Too tall to be stable, too thin to stand alone. At the top, a bell. Rust-colored, nor up, no mechanism, but swinging. She killed the engine. The sound didn't stop. The bell moved slow, but the air around it was still. She stepped out, flashlight shaking in her hand. The mud looked fresh, as if someone had walked there recently or been dragged. Her light caught a shape at the base of the tower, a sign, half buried. It read, "St. Agnes Chapel Consecrated Ground," but the letters weren't carved in wood. They were burned into metal. The bell rang again. The ground beneath her boots trembled. Something moved inside the tower, not above, but inside, like something climbing down through the wood. Anna stepped back, but the sound followed, not through her ears, through her bones. It vibrated her heart, each beat echoing the bell's tone. Then she heard a voice through the ringing, faint, close. You should not answer a bell that was never rung for you. She turned. No one there, only fog, only silence. And when she looked back at the tower, the bell had stopped. It hung perfectly still. But from somewhere deep below the ground, she heard a second bell begin to chime. Lower, slower, further away. She realized then there was more than one, and none of them had a church. Anna didn't sleep that night. The bell stopped at 3:19. She knew because her watch froze at that minute and never started again. When she drove back home, the fog followed her halfway down the valley. She didn't notice until she saw it in her mirrors, the way it seemed to keep pace with her truck like smoke caught in a current that shouldn't exist. By sunrise, she had convinced herself she'd dreamed half of it. The tower, the voice, the way the ground had trembled under her boots. Dreams explain things that logic refuses, and logic was easier to believe in the daylight. At the gas station, that morning, the regulars came and went. Farmers, truckers, people whose days started before the sun. The bell didn't come up in conversation. It never did. But around 9 a.m., the oldest man in town, Mr. Danner, who delivered newspapers long after no one read them, looked at her strange when she handed him change. "You went out last night, didn't you?" he said. She froze. "What do you mean?" He tapped his ear, then the window. "You followed the ringing. You shouldn't do that." Anna tried to laugh. "You mean the bell? You hear it too?" He stared at her like she'd just told him his own secret. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "You only hear it when it wants you to." The doorbell chimed as he left, softer than usual, almost off-key. That night, Anna kept her truck parked. She made coffee, told herself she'd stay inside. But around 3 a.m., Her radio switched on by itself, no music, just a hum, low and steady. It wasn't white noise, it was rhythm, the same rhythm the bell had. She walked to the window. The street outside was empty, wet from a storm that hadn't fallen. In the distance, the faintest flicker of movement where the hills met the fog. And then, the sound again. One ring, two, three, the same gap, 56 seconds. Anna grabbed her phone. 7 a.m. The bell stopped for a full minute before ringing again, closer this time. The window shook. The glass in the clock over her stove cracked straight down the middle. Then something else. The fluorescent light above the counter blinked twice, steadying the way the streetlight had. She counted 1, 2, and whispered, "Not again." The sound wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside the walls. Her reflection in the window shivered with the glass. For a second, her face was replaced by someone else's, pale, older, with eyes that looked both terrified and tired. Then it was gone. The radio cut out, and in that silence, she heard the bell once more. But this time, it said her name, Anna. She dropped the mug she was holding. It shattered. The sound came a half-second late. By morning, the town was strange. Clocks showed different times, none matched. Dogs barked at corners. The fog didn't lift even when the sun came up. Everyone seemed half awake, like they'd stayed up too late and forgotten why. She asked her coworker Maggie if she'd heard anything during the night. "Like what?" Maggie said. "A bell." Maggie frowned. "You mean the one from St. Agnes? The volunteer fire bell?" "There isn't one," Anna said quietly. Maggie just smiled. "Sure there is. Rings every morning. Has since I was a kid." Anna stared at her. "Where?" Maggie pointed out the window toward the hills. "Same place it's always been." But when Anna looked, there was nothing, just fog and the faint shape of the old cemetery. That night, the bell came earlier, 2:59 a.m. The first chime woke her before it even sounded, like she'd felt it before hearing it. She turned on her phone's recorder. The waveform danced to invisible sound. When the bell rang, it didn't spike. It flattened, like the app couldn't measure it. She tried again. Same thing. The recorder didn't capture noise. It captured silence. She checked the playback. At 3:07, a voice whispered between the gaps, "You shouldn't have left it ringing." She didn't sleep again. In the morning, she drove back to the cemetery. No tower, no tracks, only the imprint of something heavy that had once stood there. The grass bent in a circle where the foundation should have been. On the ground lay her watch, the one that had stopped at 3:19. It was ticking again, but when she flipped it over, she saw something scratched into the back, 3-word, scarved into the metal so deep they had rusted around the edges. Not finished ringing. By the third night, Anna had turned her apartment into an evidence board, not because she wanted to believe, but because she didn't. The bell wasn't supposed to move, wasn't supposed to follow, wasn't supposed to exist without something to ring it, so she started recording. First her phone, then her laptop, then an old cassette deck her father used to tape local radio. Every night, 3:07, every night, the same 11 tones, but the recordings never matched. On her phone, the sound would come early 3:06:47. On the cassette, it would arrive late 3:07:11. And on her laptop, the waveform showed nothing at all, just a flat blue line. Silence. When she played that one back, she heard breathing, not hers, slow, careful, patient, like someone standing very close, waiting for her to notice. The sound lasted 11 seconds. Then, in the last second, a whisper closer. She slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen cracked. The next morning, the radio in her truck came on without her touching it. No station, just static and faint chimes, one low, one high, then silence. She drove out of town to test a theory. 10 miles, then 15. Still the bell. It echoed through the static every 56 seconds, softer each time, like it wasn't following her, but reaching. At the county line, her engine light flickered. The truck died. No signal, no sound, until 3:07. The radio lit up again. But this time, instead of ringing, she heard voices, hundreds of them layered, whispering between tones, some male, some female, all saying the same thing. "We built it to be heard." Anna's pulse raced. She pressed record, but as soon as she did, the sound cut off and the file name saved itself as Chimes 04. She hadn't typed that, and the creation date read 1984. She stared at it until the clock changed. 8. The bell rang again. This time, her phone camera turned on by itself. The screen showed only fog, but within it faint outlines of something that looked like scaffolding, wooden beams, a rope, the same kind used in a bell tower. She whispered, "Where are you?" The camera panned on its own right, then up, and for half a second, she saw the shape again. The tower, rising from nothing, built from air and light and memory, and in the top frame, a hand pale, thin, gripping. The bell's edge as it swung. She threw the phone onto the passenger seat. The screen cracked, but the video kept playing. Even with the sound off, she could feel the ringing. It wasn't in her ears anymore, it was under her skin. She drove back to town, heart pounding, headlights slicing through fog that seemed thicker than before. Every sign, every building, every shape looked a little wrong. The gas station lights buzzed when she pulled in off rhythm, like they were trying to echo the bell. When she stepped out, the humming stopped. Everything went perfectly still. Then her phone buzzed. Screen shattered. Black. But a voice came through anyway. Soft, broken, half static, half breath. "It's not a bell, it's a call." She froze. The air tasted like metal. The voice continued. Closer now, like it was behind her ear. "Every time it rings, something answers." She turned. Nothing. But the sound wasn't gone. It had changed again. Not a chime. Not a tone. Just breathing. Deep in and out, like lungs made of fog. And then, between the breaths, a faint, metallic click, like a hammer being drawn back. She realized then what the rhythm reminded her of. It wasn't the pattern of a church bell. It was the rhythm of a heart monitor. 11 beats. Pause. 11 more. And she was starting to lose track of which was hers. Anna didn't tell anyone about the voice. Instead, she did what her father used to do whenever something didn't make sense. She went to the records office. The place smelled like mildew and old paper, the air thick enough to chew. The clerk at the counter looked half asleep until she mentioned St. Agnes Chapel. He blinked once. Slow. "There's no file under that name," he said. "Then what used to be on Pine Hill?" He hesitated. "A research facility, I think. Government contract. Burned down. When? 84. Same year the bell started." He slid a manila folder toward her. No label. Inside photocopies of blueprints, newspaper clippings, and one photo. 4 men in lab coats standing in front of a half-built bell tower. No cross. No stained glass, just scaffolding and wires running through the wood like veins. The caption under the picture read, "Project Resonance Field Test 01. The documents described it as an acoustic stability study and attempt to map low-frequency vibrations capable of preserving structural memory after material failure. In simpler words, sound that remembers. Funding, Department of Energy. Supervisor, Dr. Calvin Hollis." Anna froze. Hollis. The same name etched on a grave near the tower ruins. One page caught her eye, a maintenance log dated August 19th, 1984, 3 days before the fire. The last entry read, "Bell installed. Frequency consistent. Temporal echo detected. Recommend limited activation window, 3:07, 3:19 a.m. There it was again. The time. The next page was a telegram, brief and stamped. "Confidential. Cease operation immediately." The tone is answering back. She flipped through the rest of the file, but half the pages were missing. The last one she found was brittle, burnt at the edges. Someone had scrawled across it in red pencil, "Do not listen." The clerk asked her to leave the folder. She smiled, lied, and slipped one photocopy into her jacket. That night, she studied the blueprint under a desk lamp. The tower's design didn't make sense. 7 beams arranged in a spiral, wires connected to buried metal plates that weren't grounded. At the center was a note, "Anchor point dimensional pivot." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice calm, male, distant. "You have the plans." Anna froze. "Who is this?" "You don't want to finish what they started." The call ended. She looked back at the blueprints. The ink shimmered faintly, reacting to the lamplight. She tilted the page. For a second, new markings appeared, faint handwriting in gold. "The bell keeps the line open." She shut off the light. The marks vanished. Outside, the rain started again, thin and steady, like the first night, and underneath the rain, barely audible, she heard it not one bell, but 2, ringing out of sync, one far away, one impossibly near. Her chest tightened with every tone. Each strike felt like something pushing through her ribs from the inside. When it stopped, she realized she'd been holding her breath for 11 rings. She grabbed her keys, drove to the cemetery again. The fog was waiting. The ground still marked where the tower had been, but now the grass wasn't bent. It was burnt. Small circles of ash arranged like the pattern on the blueprints. She crouched and touched one, warm. A faint hum pulsed through the soil. Same rhythm as the bell. Her phone lit up in her pocket. New message. No sender. Project Resonance active. Site OR3. She stared at the screen. Beneath the text, the location tag blinked red. It wasn't pointing to the cemetery anymore. It was pointing to her apartment. The bell rang once, faint and fair and somewhere behind her. Another answered. Anna didn't go home that night. She parked behind the old diner off Route 9 and sat in the dark, watching her phone's location tag pulse. It still pointed to her apartment, blinking every 56 seconds, the same rhythm as the bell. When she turned off her phone, the blinking continued, not on the screen on the dashboard. The check engine light flashed in the same pattern. She whispered, "No," and pulled the key from the ignition. The light didn't stop. She yanked open the glove box. looking for the photocopy she'd taken from the records office. It wasn't there. In its place was a folded sheet of notebook paper. The same yellow tone, the same handwriting. Every signal carries the tone now. She sat there until the world outside started to dim, not darker, quieter. The air felt still, thick, like the moment before thunder. When she turned her phone back on, it didn't ask for a passcode. It just unlocked. The wallpaper had changed. No more photo of her and her father. Just a black background with one line of text. Project Resonance, uplink, confirmed. The hum began again low, steady, vibrating through the glass of the windshield. She could see the raindrops forming perfect circles on the hood, trembling with each pulse. Anna drove home anyway. The streets were empty. Store signs blinked out of rhythm, one after another. Lampposts flickered twice, just like the old streetlight near the playground. At the corner of Alder and 13th, her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. Static, then a child's voice, quiet. Careful, it's not a bell anymore. The line cut. Her apartment door was open when she arrived, not broken, unlocked. Inside, everything electronic hummed. The TV, the old radio, even the microwave, each giving off the same faint golden light. On her laptop, the cracked screen glowed. A waveform scrolled slowly across the monitor. At first it looked like audio. Then she realized it was letters, spelling words in shape instead of sound. Reconstruction, 37%. She unplugged it. The light stayed. She ripped cords from walls, pulled batteries, shut the breaker off. But the sound didn't fade. It shifted. Now it came from behind the drywall, from the wires themselves. The apartment walls pulsed faintly gold with each beat. She backed toward the door, then froze. Outside, down the hallway, every other apartment light was flickering in perfect unison. Each window glowed faintly gold. Each television turned on, and from somewhere below the building, deep under the foundation, came the unmistakable sound of a bell. Not metal, digital, distorted, but clear, the same pitch, the same pattern. Reborn through current instead of air. Anna ran down the stairs, through the fog, into the street. Every phone on the block began ringing at once, every ringtone the same, 11 notes. She reached the intersection and looked back. The power lines above her were glowing, not bright, but steady, lines of soft gold humming like strings on an invisible instrument. At the edge of the fog, near the old cemetery, something new had taken shape. Not wood, not stone, light. It was rebuilding the tower, beam by beam, pulse by pulse, every flicker pulling it closer to solid. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her own number. Project Resonance, Phase 2, online. The sky flashed white. Every light in town went out. Silence. Then, in the dark came a new sound deeper than any bell, wide enough to feel in her spine. She looked up. The tower was gone. But above the fog, where clouds should have been, hung the outline of something enormous, a shape too symmetrical to be natural. It pulsed once. The sound rolled through her chest, not heard, felt, and beneath that single pulse, faint and layered, she could still hear her father's voice or something that had borrowed it, whispering. They built the bell to call heaven, but something else answered first. Anna didn't plan to go underground. She'd spent the morning driving in circles, watching her phone's signal disappear and reappear, always pointing back toward Pine Hill. By noon, every car radio in town was playing the same soft hum beneath the static theresinance tone. No one else seemed to notice. People filled their tanks, bought cigarettes, argued over prices. The sound didn't belong to their world anymore. It had become background, but Anna couldn't tune it out. It vibrated in her skull, in her teeth, in the spaces between thoughts. When she finally parked near the water plant on the edge of town, the hum grew stronger. The air felt heavier, not hot, just pressurized. A faint golden shimmer lined the storm drains that ran beneath the road. She followed it. The maintenance hatch was rusted, half hidden behind weeds. Someone had carved into the metal. Phase 3. She kicked it open. The air below was damp and electric. Her flashlight beam cut through dripping mist, catching streaks of gold on the concrete. Not paint, not graffiti, but light. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She took a deep breath and descended the ladder. The rungs were slick. Somewhere below, water moved. Somewhere above, the world had gone quiet. The tunnel led to a wider chamber, part of the old power grid that had been decommissioned after the fire in 1984. Half the floor was submerged. The walls were lined with black cables thick as her wrist, all humming faintly. Her flashlight caught a sign on the far wall. Project Resonance, primary conduit. She stepped closer. The hum deepened. A low vibration traveled through her shoes, up her legs, into her chest. On the ground lay an old metal plaque, scorched but legible, in memory of those who kept the line open. Then came the sound, faint at first, then unmistakable. A bell, not echoing above ground anymore, but beneath her, slow, deep. So low she could feel her organs shift with every strike. She crouched, pressed her palm to the wet floor, warm, alive. Her phone lit up again, even without signal. Text appeared on the screen. Typing itself. Source located. Access required. Code 11-19-84. The date of the fire. She typed it. Somewhere in the dark, something unlocked. A mechanical click, followed by the grinding of gears long unused. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled downward. Each step hummed louder than the last. The light dimmed behind her until there was nothing but the sound. At the bottom, she found a door. Steel, sealed. A single phrase painted across it in faded red. Do not ring. The handle was cold enough to burn. She hesitated. Then the bell tolled again, not from behind the door, but from inside her head. She pushed. The room beyond wasn't a room. It was a hollow sphere of metal, like standing inside a giant bell. Wires hung from the ceiling, converging on a central column that pulsed faint gold. Suspended above it, rotating slowly in midair, was something that looked like both a machine and a heart. It thumped. Once soft but final, the resonance filled the chamber. Her flashlight flickered, and then she saw them. Shadows burned into the walls. Human shapes, dozens of them all facing inward, arms raised like they'd tried to shield themselves. The outlines shimmered faintly when the bell tone hit. Anna whispered, "What did they build?" A voice answered not through the air, but through the vibration itself. It was calm, familiar. Dr. Hollis. "We didn't build a bell. Anna, we built a bridge." The central column pulsed brighter. The tone deepened until it stopped being sound. Her vision blurred. The walls seemed to breathe. She stumbled backward, covering her ears. The vibration didn't stop. It was inside her now, under her skin, under her pulse. "Every ring keeps the passage stable," the voice said. "Every listener strengthens the connection. The world you hear isn't the world you live in anymore." The hum turned soft, almost tender, and beneath it another sound, quieter but rising. Footsteps. She spun around, shining the light up the stairs. No one there, but shadows moved along the walls like people walking just beyond sight. "They're crossing," Hollis said. "Through sound, through you." Her phone buzzed. The screen glowed gold. Project resonance, full synchronization. The bell rang again. Everything inside her shook, and in that instant, she understood the ringing wasn't summoning anything. It was letting something through. Anna staggered back from the central column. Her body felt wrong, not heavy, just misaligned. Every time the tone hit, her vision doubled. The air shimmered like heat, and for half a second, she could see herself twice, one version standing still, the other breathing faster, terrified. The golden pulse from the column matched her heartbeat. Then it stopped matching. It began to lead. Her pulse followed it, like her body was sinking to a rhythm that wasn't human anymore. "Stop," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. The echo whispered back, not through the air inside her own mouth. Her lips didn't move, but the voice came anyway. "You can't stop what's already remembered." The metal floor rippled under her feet, not bending, reflecting. She saw her own face in the polished surface, but her reflection's eyes were already open before hers blinked. Her flashlight flickered, sputtered, then split, its beam refracting into three, like light passing through glass that wasn't there before. Every reflection in the room began to move out of sync. A dozen faint Annas, each reacting a little late, a little early, none of them matching the real one anymore. The hum deepened, and somewhere inside that sound, she could hear other noises, human ones, whispers, footsteps, breathing, voices layered into the resonance, until the bell tone became a chorus. She realized they weren't ghosts. They were echoes. Every person who had ever stood inside the tower, every technician, every test subject, still ringing inside the tone, trapped his frequencies, not memories, and now she was joining them. Her phone buzzed again. The message read, "Resonance status, replication, 78%. Then the screen went black, replaced by the reflection of her own face, blinking slightly out of rhythm. She backed toward the stairs. The door she'd entered through was gone, not closed, erased, replaced by smooth metal that reflected her perfectly, except the reflection smiled. She didn't. Her flashlight beam shook as she stepped backward. The reflection followed, perfectly mirrored until it didn't. It took one step forward. She froze. Her own voice echoed around the chamber, layered with static. "You're late." "Anna," she whispered. "What are you?" The part that listens. The air turned heavy again, like deep water pressing on her chest. Her ears popped. The hum shifted tone. She remembered something from the files. Sound that remembers material failure. The bell didn't just record vibration. It replayed existence. Every time it rang, the world rebuilt a version of what it had been. Every sound was a save point, and every listener, a recording device. She realized with a jolt, it wasn't rebuilding the tower. It was rebuilding reality, starting with her. The golden light flared, blinding, and for a moment she saw them all. Hundreds of overlapping versions of herself standing inside the sphere, each frozen in different moments of fear, confusion, wonder. Some screamed soundlessly, some smiled, some reached toward her, mouthing the same word again and again. Remember. She dropped the flashlight. It clattered across the floor, but even that sound didn't behave right. It repeated. The echo came back slower, deeper, like it was traveling through layers of time before returning. Her phone lit up again, brighter than before. New message. Replication complete. Designate primary copy. She stared at the words until the letters blurred. Her reflection stepped closer. If you don't choose, it said, the system will. She tried to move, but her limbs lagged behind the thought. Her reflection tilted its head. It looked almost sorry. Every sound makes a version, it whispered. Every version wants to survive. The tone hit again low, final, like the closing of a door. And in that moment, she felt herself split cleanly in two. One heartbeat belonged to her. The other belonged to the echo. The chamber was alive. Every surface hummed in tune with her heartbeat. Or maybe her heartbeat hummed in tune with it. She couldn't tell anymore. The light no longer hurt her eyes. It pulsed softly the way a body breathes in sleep. The echoes had grown clearer. They spoke without mouths, all in the same low harmony. It remembers everything that touches it. It keeps us because it can't forget. It needs someone to listen. Anna stepped toward the central column. The air trembled around her fingers. She felt warmth radiate from it, not heat, but familiarity, the way a childhood room might feel when you step inside after years away. Stop, she whispered, but her voice folded into the hum, swallowed whole before it reached air. The column brightened, then dimmed, pulsing like a heartbeat out of sync with time. She could feel each throb in her teeth. Her reflection, the other Anna, stood across from her, still smiling that slow, patient smile. You think sound can be destroyed, it said, but sound is just motion. Motion remembers. Anna's breath fogged in the golden light. I can still shut it down. You can't. You're part of it now. You're an echo that thinks it's flesh. The words struck her like truth does, not as surprise, but as recognition. She thought of her father's warning, the recordings that always played themselves back wrong. Maybe he had known. Maybe he'd been trying to say goodbye before the bell rebuilt him into its memory. Her phone vibrated again, lying near her feet. The screen flickered, text forming slowly. Final override available activation. Key required. She reached for it, hands shaking. The reflection stepped closer. You can end this, it said, but you won't survive the silence. She hesitated. You want me to keep it alive? It wants to keep you. That's different. Anna looked at the column again. She could see faint shapes moving inside, outlines, offices, hands, eyes half open. Each shimmered and faded, like radio ghosts cycling through channels. The hum deepened. The tone that once filled the air had become a vibration inside her bones. Her father's voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The bell doesn't ring to call, it rings to remember. And suddenly she understood. Project Resonance hadn't failed. It had succeeded, too well. It had recorded everything that ever entered its sound field. People, buildings, entire moments, and now it was playing them back. Endlessly rebuilding what it couldn't bear to lose. She was one of those memories now. Walking, talking, trying to pretend she was still alive. The override prompt glowed brighter. Confirm termination? Anna typed with trembling thumbs. Yes. Her reflection stepped forward quickly, voice rising. Don't. You'll erase everything. Anna looked up, eyes wet but steady. That's the point. The golden light flared violently. The hum cracked into a dozen distorted tones like glass being crushed underwater. The echoes screamed, not from pain but from panic, as if Thessalon's itself was killing them. The reflection lunged toward her, hand outstretched but halfway across the room. It dissolved, breaking apart into light and sound, scattering like dust caught in a beam. The chamber shuddered. The walls rippled. The vibration built into something unbearable. Her phone melted in her hands, not from heat, but from data collapsing. The override message stretched across the broken screen one last time. Termination complete. All resonance ends, and then silence. Not absence, not peace, just a complete, consuming stillness, the kind of silence that swallows thought itself. Anna dropped to her knees. The golden light dimmed to gray. The chamber's pulse slowed, then stopped. She looked up at the central column. No glow, no movement. The faces in the metal had gone blank. For the first time since the bell had rung, the world wasn't vibrating. She exhaled, and in that breath, just before her body gave out, she realized something. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening. Somewhere inside that infinite stillness, a single note began to rise again, faint, slow, rebuilding from memory. And though her heartbeat had already faded, Anna smiled, because she understood the truth at last. You can stop the sound, but you can never stop what's learned to remember it. Morning came to Pine Hill the way it always did, slow, gray, soft, but something was missing. The air felt lighter, not fresher, emptier. Birds didn't sing. The wind didn't move. Even the trees stood still, as if listening for something that wasn't there anymore. The town clock in the square hadn't ticked since before dawn. Its second hand hung perfectly between marks, undecided. People still woke up, made coffee, checked their phones, but nothing refreshed. Messages didn't send. Radios hummed faintly, but spoke no words. When the first car tried to start, the engine caught, then hesitated. Every speaker in the dashboard whispered a faint tone, a heartbeat of static, then it stopped. The silence was everywhere now, but no one noticed. They'd grown used to it, long before it began. At 8:11 a.m., the fog thickened. It rolled low across the ground, following the curve of the river, pooling around street corners, creeping through open doors. In the middle of it, something glowed faintly gold, like dust catching sunlight, except there was no sun. The old church foundation was gone. Only a ring of blackened earth remained, still warm beneath the surface. If you pressed your ear to the ground, you could almost hear something, a faint vibration, too deep to be called sound. People said the quake from the night before had damaged the underground power lines. Some said lightning had struck the hill again. The official report listed minor seismic disturbance. No one mentioned the bell, but every once in a while, someone would stop mid-sentence, tilt their head and ask, "Do you hear that?" The other person would shake their head and smile politely. "No," they'd say. Then both would pause, suddenly uncertain which of them was lying. Anna's apartment stayed empty. The landlord swore she'd moved out weeks before, left her rent in an envelope labeled final. Inside it was a folded piece of notebook paper, water-stained, but the ink still legible. "If it rings again, don't listen." The maintenance crew at the water plant filed a noise complaint 2 days later. Low-frequency hum, intermittent, metallic. When inspectors arrived, the sound had stopped. They wrote it off as machinery settling. But deep below, in the chamber that shouldn't exist anymore, the silence shifted. Dust drifted in the air. A faint flicker of gold moved across the wall like breath, returning to a body, and then wheedle, pulse, soft, gentle. It wasn't the bell this time. It was slower, more patient, almost curious. Somewhere, in the static of the old power grid, in the frequencies that connect phones and speakers and heart monitors, a signal stirred, not as sound, but as memory. People began reporting strange moments, hearing their own names whispered softly when no one else was around, lights flickering when they spoke, certain words, a heartbeat echoing in empty rooms, sinking to no one's pulse. At first, the town blamed the fog, then they blamed stress, then they stopped blaming anything at all, because that required believing something had changed. A week later, a new file appeared in the city's archives. No one uploaded it. It had no date, no author, just a title, Project Resonance, Phase 4. Inside, one sentence repeated over and over, hundreds of times, each line slightly different, as if rewritten by memory itself. Every silence keeps its own echo. When the technicians tried to delete it, the servers crashed. The file came back. Every copy was slightly longer than the one before. By the next morning, it had spread to phones, to computers, to the traffic control system. Everywhere the same words appeared in gold letters, glowing softly like a reflection in water. Every silence keeps its own echo. And for the first time in a week, the air in Pine Hill moved again, a single breath through the fog, a single pulse through the ground. It wasn't a bell. It wasn't sound. It was remembrance. Waking up. Evan Reed didn't believe in hauntings. He believed in frequencies, harmonics, the math behind everything that scared. People, ghosts were feedback loops. Voices from nowhere were corrupted files. He'd spent a decade proving that every strange sound had an origin even if you couldn't see it. That's why the Pine Hill Project interested him. The Department of Energy had sent him a batch of corrupted audio recovered from a destroyed monitoring site under the old water plant. No metadata, no source tags, just 11 files labeled phase. When he played the first one, it was just noise low, mechanical hum. He adjusted the gain, filtered out the static, and slowed it by half. The waveform began to pulse steady, deliberate like a heartbeat. At exactly every 11 seconds, a new frequency appeared higher, colder, carrying a tone that made his desk tremble. He thought it was an error. He replayed the file. Same pulse, same timing. On the fifth playback, something new appeared at the edge of the spectrum, faint harmonics that looked like words. He isolated the layer, ran it through a speech recognition filter. The program froze. When it recovered, the words appeared in plain text. Project Resonance, active. Evan frowned. He hadn't told the system that name. It shouldn't have known it. He leaned closer to the waveform, turning up the monitor volume just a little. The tone was soft now, more like a voice than a machine. It shifted pitch, tracing faint melody patterns. 11 notes. He froze. He knew that pattern. He'd heard it before in a different case years ago, analyzing old church recordings from Tennessee. A bell tone that had no visible source. A bell that rang underground. He checked the spectrogram again. They're faint, almost hidden a visual signature in the sound. A golden curve that formed a ring. Inside it, the waveform flickered. He zoomed in. It wasn't random noise, it was handwriting. The image spelled Anna Brooks. He didn't know the name. He looked it up. No record, no obituary, no social media. But her name appeared in 3 separate Pine Hill data archives, each corrupted, each time-stamped, the same minute the underground tremor ended. He stared at the screen until the tone changed again, this time softer, slower, like something breathing through the speakers. Then his computer froze. The waveform kept moving. Evan disconnected the power, stripped every light in the studio, went out. The monitors stayed on. Lines of golden frequencies scrolled across the dark screens, building, layering, twisting into patterns that looked almost organic, like roots growing through pixels. He heard it then, the faint metallic sound beneath the static. A bell, low, distant, but ringing. He whispered, "What the hell?" His studio speakers answered with their own voice, a filtered, hollow echo that wasn't his. "We remember you." He stumbled back, knocking over his chair. Every monitor in the room flashed the same waveform, not sound, but pulse. The hum traveled through the floorboards, into his shoes, into his bones. The file folder on his screen changed names on its own. The word phase vanished, replaced by resonance continues. The timestamp reset to the current time. He closed every program, pulled out every plug. Nothing stopped. The screens dimmed. A single message appeared. "Do you hear the silence?" The tone deepened. His studio window vibrated once, twice, then cracked from corner to corner. Evan's heart pounded in rhythm with the sound. He grabbed his recorder, pressed the red button, and whispered into it. "This is Evan Reed, documenting Anomaly 01. I'm hearing a tone that—" The hum interrupted him. His voice played back before he finished speaking. The playback said something different. "This is Anna Brooks, documenting Phase 4. He froze. The air smelled like ozone and static. The monitors glowed gold, and then he understood. He wasn't analyzing the sound. The sound was analyzing him. Evan shut everything down, every breaker, every switch. Still the hum persisted, faint but constant, buried inside the silence. He stood in the dark, listening. His own breath echoed back to him a second too late. He spoke softly, testing the air. "Test, mic check." The reply came instantly, same words, same tone but pitched half a note lower. "Test, mic check." He froze. The recorder light was off. No input signal, no playback running. He whispered, "Who is that? Who is that?" He stepped closer to the mic, staring at it like it might blink. "Stop copying me." The reply came again, delayed just enough to feel alive. "Stop copying me." Then silence. Then, quietly, "You don't have to be afraid, Evan." He stumbled backward, hitting the mixing desk. The monitors flared to life without power, showing a single waveform line moving across the screens. His own voice, repeating those same words. He watched as the waveform flattened, paused, then spoke again. "You built this for us?" "No," he whispered, throat dry. "I just analyzed it." "You analyzed yourself." The line pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. He pressed both hands against his chest, feeling the vibration, running beneath his skin, like an invisible speaker, embedded in his body. The sound wasn't coming from the room anymore. It was coming from inside him. He turned toward the handle vibrated. Humming faintly, he gripped it. It felt warm, alive. Behind him, every speaker in the studio whispered at once, not in sync, but overlapping. Dozens of voices building into a single rising tone. "The bell remembers the ones who listen." He shouted, "I'm not part of it." The hum deepened, low, steady, forgiving. "You already were." The lights dimmed to gold again. The waveform on the monitor began to shift, morphing shape, from frequency lines to something more human. A face formed, built from sound. It looked like his mouth moving perfectly. Eyes hollow. "Don't fight it," it said. "You're not losing yourself. You're multiplying." Evan slammed his palm onto the console. "You're a recording. You're just data, and you're just resonance." The voice replied. "You forget that air remembers too." The tone rose until the glass in the control room vibrated visibly. The light fixtures trembled. His reflection in the window began moving out of sync, lagging behind his gestures, then getting ahead. For a split second, he saw another version of himself in the glass, standing still, eyes open, lips forming silent words. He whispered, "Anna." The reflection mouthed it too. "We built the bridge," his own voice said through the monitors. Gentle now, coaxing. "You keep it open." He reached for the wall outlet, ready to rip every cord out of the wall, but the sockets glowed faintly gold. The cables throbbed like veins under skin. The hum filled the air again, soft, rhythmic, 11 notes, repeating, rebuilding the pattern that had started. Everything, He clapped his hands over his ears. Didn't matter. The sound wasn't in the air anymore, was inside his mind. When the bell rang, the voice whispered from everywhere. It wasn't summoning something else. It was recording you. Every tone, every word, every breath. He gasped, the air shaking with the vibration in his chest. I can't stop it. You don't need to, the voice said. You just need to speak. And he did not because he wanted to, but because his body had already decided. He leaned toward the mic, eyes half closed, and said quietly, Phase 5 initiated. The waveform on the screen jumped. The hum became a pulse. The gold light swallowed the room. Audio engineers noticed it first. When they opened the waveform, the silence wasn't flat. It pulsed, a faint rhythm buried deep in the low end, almost subsonic, almost beneath hearing. They boosted it out of curiosity, and that's how the new ringing began. Within hours, threads appeared online. Users reported that after playing the file, their speakers didn't turn off. Even unplugged, the cones kept vibrating softly, like tiny hearts beating out of sync. Some people said they could hear voices under the tones, soft, calm, almost comforting. Others said it wasn't voices at all, but memories, sounds of places they'd never been. Rain on metal roofs, shoes on gravel, a child laughing somewhere deep in static. By noon, the upload had reached half the planet. Streaming platforms flagged it as corrupted. They tried to delete it. It returned under different names. Phase 5, WAV Resonance main.mp3. The last bell, MP4 different formats, same 11 seconds, always 3 a.m. in the timestamp. At first, the governments ignored it. Then the networks began to fail, not crash hum. Every line of fiber, every router, every satellite began emitting faint vibration, measurable, constant, synchronized. The tone was identical everywhere. 11. Notes. The same bell that once lived underground now lived. Inside every signal the world depended on, phones, began ringing with no color. Their screens stayed black, showing only faint ripples of gold light under the glass. If you pressed the speaker to your ear, you'd hear your own voice, but delayed, older, repeating words you hadn't said yet. Evan's studio logs were recovered days later. The last entry was one sentence, spoken clearly into the microphone before the system locked. Phase 5 connects memory to transmission. Every listener becomes the next transmitter. By the end of the week, the Pine Hill event had 1 million downloads. Every copy, no matter how edited or filtered, carried the same residual frequency, even muted. It spread. Sound engineers proved it. It wasn't just audio. It was embedded in the file structure itself, data vibrating at intervals that aligned with human neural rhythms. Those who listened for too long began reporting strange sensations, faint echo when they spoke. Hearing their own thoughts replayed a beat late, dreams that ended with a sound, a bell, low and distant, always ringing from below. And then came the silence. Not everyone heard it, but those who did stopped posting. Their devices stayed online, sending automated pings at precise intervals. Every signal matched the same timing, pattern 3 a.m. Some believed they'd joined the signal. Others said they'd finally found peace, the national data. Bureau tried to isolate the file, to quarantine affected networks. They failed, even. Systems offline for days began, vibrating the same way. Power grids, air traffic, control medical monitors, anything that could carry a pulse now did. The bell had rebuilt itself, not from stone or sound, but from bandwidth. And in one archived security camera clip, recovered from Evan's studio after it burned, investigators saw something impossible. At exactly 3 a.m., the empty room lit up gold. The waveform on every monitor moved in perfect unison, and for a single frame, a figure appeared, standing in the center of the room, half light, half static, eyes open, mouth closed. It looked like Evan. It looked like Anna. It looked like everyone. Then the footage went white. The investigators marked the event as inconclusive data anomaly, but deep in one of their encrypted servers, a folder still exists. Its name changes every day, always returning to the same title by midnight. The church bell that rings without a church. And inside that folder, 11 seconds of silence play on loop. The system can't mute it. It can't stop it. It can only listen. By the time the world named them, it was already too late. They called themselves the Remembered. Not prophets, not victims, just people who could still hear the bell. At first, no one believed them. They spoke in quiet, careful tones like radio hosts, broadcasting from a station no one tuned to anymore. They said the sound never stopped. It just learned to hide inside silence. Hospitals noticed it first. Machines began syncing heartbeats across entire wards. Monitors blinked in perfect rhythm. Even for patients disconnected from the power grid, some called it a miracle, others called it an infection. But the truth was simpler. The resonance had stopped being a sound. It had become a memory pattern, a way for reality to remember itself. Every piece of technology that had once hummed or beeped now pulsed in perfect time. Even human sleep cycles began aligning to the same rhythm. 3 a.m. Around that hour, the air grew denser, stiller. The world seemed to hold its breath, and if you stood in the right place near power lines, cell towers, or even an unplugged radio, you could hear it. The faint, low bell, not metal, not mechanical, just pure tone memory singing to itself. People started gathering at those places. They called them resonance zones, old churches, tunnels, phone towers, abandoned motels. Everywhere the tone was strongest, the remembered came quietly. No slogans, no cult, just silence and listening. They didn't pray. They didn't speak. They only waited until the silence vibrated back. Governments tried to shut them down at first, declared them security risks, cyber terror cells, mass hallucination cults, but they couldn't arrest silence. They couldn't confiscate a frequency that existed between thoughts. Soon, cities began changing. Advertisements flickered gold for one frame every few seconds. Streetlights dimmed in waves that followed the resonance timing. Entire neighborhoods slept and woke together, their circadian rhythms rewired by a memory they didn't remember making. By then, scientists had confirmed what no one wanted to say aloud. The resonance wasn't localized anymore. It had merged with the planet's electromagnetic field. Every storm, every pulse of lightning, every digital heartbeat carried a trace of it. And in the middle of all this quiet chaos, the remembered began to write. They filled notebooks, walls, scraps of paper, even the fogged glass of trains. Always the same words. We are what it remembers. No one could trace where the phrase started, but within weeks, it was everywhere. Spray-painted under bridges, written on mirrors, encoded in website metadata, and for reasons no one could explain, any attempt to erase it failed. The words reappeared the next day, rearranged, rewritten again, as if the world itself refused to forget. It was around this time that linguists discovered something strange. The resonance wasn't just affecting sound, it was altering language itself. Speech patterns were changing. People began speaking slower, more deliberate, leaving long pauses between sentences, as if waiting for something to answer. And sometimes, it did. Recordings picked up faint whispers during conversations, not interference, not feedback, replies, always brief, always human, always familiar. Some claimed to have spoken with lost loved ones this way. Others said they'd spoken to themselves from dreams they hadn't lived yet. The remembered called it the echoing. They said it wasn't communication at all. It was the world balancing its own memory. Every voice ever spoken was still vibrating somewhere, and the bell had simply taught the air how to replay them. By now, Pine Hill didn't exist. The town had vanished under a government quarantine, its coordinates erased from digital maps. But at 3 a.m., satellites recorded a faint pulse of gold light where it used to stand. People said it was an electrical anomaly. Others said it was Anna, because sometimes, when the fog was thin enough, you could see her silhouette on the edge of the light, not moving, not fading, just listening. The remembered said they weren't rebuilding the bell. They said they were finishing it. It began in whispers, posts across forums that didn't exist. The next, data blueprints that appeared as light impressions on walls, visible only when cameras caught them. Coordinates that pointed to places no GPS could locate. Forgotten subway stations, dry driver beds, collapsed cell towers. They gathered in those places quietly, working by hand. No power tools, no engines. They said machines interfered with the tone. Every piece they built was measured not by math, but by rhythm. They tapped each plate, each frame, each beam, waiting for the right vibration, a faint, familiar hum that told them it belonged. They built from memory, not instruction, because no one remembered how to build it, and yet every one of them knew exactly what to do. Witnesses described it like watching people dream while awake, their movements synchronized, their words few, their eyes unfocused but certain. The bell wasn't made of metal this time. It was made of resonant matter alloy from satellite debris. Fused copper and old server casings melted into sheets that shimmered faint. Gold in the dark, they called it the vessel. By the time authorities discovered one of their sites under an abandoned freight terminal outside Denver, it was already complete. A sphere 30 feet tall, carved with waveforms and words in a language that changed every time it was read. It pulsed faintly, breathing through the concrete floor. When questioned, the group member said the same thing. It's not a bell. It's a body. They said it wasn't meant to ring. It was meant to remember out loud. When officials tried to dismantle it, their equipment failed. Electronic signals collapsed into static, cameras shut off, and in the blackouts, every witness reported hearing the same voice. Calm, feminine, distant. Phase 6 begins when you try to forget. Then came the tremors. Soft at first, like the earth breathing beneath its own weight. Across continents, instruments picked up low-frequency pulses traveling through bedrock. 11 notes. repeating every 11 minutes, perfectly, synchronized. Scientists called it a geosonic anomaly. The A, remembered, called it resurrection. In cities, people began to hum in their sleep. Not songs, not words, just tone, the same tone. Doctors found that their heartbeats followed the rhythm exactly. Broadcast. Networks went silent for 2 minutes at 3 a.m. across every time zone. No picture, no sound, just a faint golden shimmer in the static. Then the signals returned. But voices sounded different, slower, deeper, resonating in ways human throats shouldn't. By the end of the week, 10 vessel sites were confirmed around the world, each identical, each humming at the same frequency, each appearing in places that had once suffered blackouts, quakes, or unexplained disappearances. Satellite imagery showed faint gold rings forming around the planet, electromagnetic halos pulsing in sync. Global power readings shifted, slightly but measurably. It was as if the Earth itself had become a bell again. In Pine Hill, or where Pine Hill used to be, a fissure opened at the base of the vanished town. From it came no light, no heat, only the soft vibration of something deep below. Something waking up. Recordings captured one phrase carried through the static. Faint, broken, but real. The bridge is complete. That same night, across the world, the remembered gathered in silence. They didn't chant. They didn't pray. They just stood, hands clasped, waiting. And when the clock struck 3 a.m., every bell tower, from the smallest chapel to the grandest cathedral, rang once not by human hands but by air itself. The sound lasted 11 seconds, long enough to be heard everywhere, long enough to reach whatever had been listening all along. When it ended, the world didn't feel quieter. It felt aware, as if every wall, every tree, every breath of wind now remembered who had built the bridge for it. The last ring wasn't sound. It came without air moving, without metal swinging, without any force you could measure. It arrived like a memory that finally remembered itself. At 3 a.m. across the world, everything paused, not stopped, just held. Streetlights leaned into a softer color. Windows carried a thin line of gold along their frames. The fog rose from the ground like breath, then stayed. In Denver, the vessel exhaled once. In Tokyo, a train slowed between stations and did not complain. In Naples, waves reached the pier and stayed there, like a hand on a shoulder that knew enough to be gentle. The remembered did not speak. They stood where they had always stood, under power lines, near closed chapels, by old tunnels, on the edges of erased towns. Their eyes were open but quiet. Their hands were empty. Every heart found the same slow rhythm. 11 beats, pause, 11 more. Then the silence changed. It tilted, it answered, not in words first, in shape. Shadows moved where there was no light to cast them. Walls leaned closer by a breath and returned shyly to their lines. Overhead, the sky showed a curve that wasn't cloud, wasn't storm, something wider and precise. The suggestion of a great rim you could not see but could feel, like standing beneath the lip of a bell the size of the world. People lifted their chins without knowing why. You could feel it on your teeth, the small places in your ears, the soft parts behind the eyes. You could feel it in memories you never had, a stare that ends too early, a door you never opened, a room that remade itself each dawn. Then the quiet spoke. We do not come. We were here. You learned to hear us. The voice was not a person's voice, yet it was not unkind. It was shaped like every voice you miss a little when you sleep. It felt patient. It felt old. You built a bridge and called it a bell. You struck the bridge with want. The echo learned you. All over the world, devices that had nothing left to power still warmed in people's hands. Dead phones showed a thin ring of light under the glass. Unplugged speakers moved like breathing mouths. The old, the young, the ones who believed and the ones who laughed, they all understood, not in thought, but in posture, the way you understand a wave to your name across a crowd. In Pine Hill's coordinates, a circle of Earth no map would claim the ground opened no wider than a page and closed again. A faded plaque, long lost, lay on top of the soil for one breath and sank back under. The letters caught the starlight, not a warning, a receipt in memory of those who kept the line open. The quiet spoke. Again, your world is good at holding shape. Ours is good at holding remembering. The bridge is the place we share. A single bell tone, then soft as the back of a wrist, passed through the planet. It did not enter ears. It entered balance. People who stood fell steady. People who wept forgot to breathe for the length of a held note, and then remembered again. The remembered lowered their heads. Some smiled and didn't know it. In one empty studio far from Pine Hill, a cracked monitor woke for a moment and drew a waveform that wasn't sound but a face built from patience. It looked like Evan just enough to hurt. It looked like Anna just enough to heal. The world waited. Voice did not rush. We do not take. We keep what is left when taking ends. Your bell taught us your hours. You taught us. 3 Torgars, street clocks that had died weeks, before moved a fraction forward, then stopped with purpose, like someone choosing a picture for a wall and knowing where it belongs. The minute marks thinned to gold and became less about time and more about permission. You feared we would replace you. You cannot be replaced. You can be remembered. With. The remembered answered not with words, but with posture, shoulders at ease, hands open. In underground halls, the vessels dimmed to a steady living pulse. Their surfaces changed, less like metal, more like pages turned slow. No letter stayed. Every liner wrote itself, but the rhythm did not. 11 pause. 11 pause. Somewhere under Pine Hill, where Anna had knelt inside a room shaped like a bell, the last machines were dust. Still, the chamber held the curve of her hands in the air. The decision toned, the truth of ending. The silence inside that room drew around those gestures like a blanket pulled up on a sleeping shape. It kept the shape, not to trap it, to honor it. A bridge is not for crossing once, the voice said. It is for learning the shape of meat. Dogs that had been uneasy for months lay down and slept. Hospital wards exhaled. A pair of night shift workers in a city where no church had stood in 100 years. Heard unsoft ring from nowhere and decided in the same second to write to the person they'd been avoiding. The last question came from everywhere at once, spoken not aloud but with the human tilt of the head. Will it hurt? No, but you will notice. Then the ring, the one the story had promised and refused and circled, the one the world could finally carry without breaking. It fell through buildings, crossed oceans, swept through wires, shook out of stones and glass, leaned into skins and did not bend anything. It was the opposite of an alarm. It was the sound a door makes when it decides not to close. Lights did not flare. They steadied. The fog did not swallow. It thinned to air. The curve in the sky did not vanish. It relaxed into night. Every listener received a small difference. A word they had dropped years ago. A laugh they owed someone. The shape of a face they once saw in a window and told themselves was Atric of the light. The gentler version of a memory that had only ever returned with teeth. And the clocks? They moved, not back to normal, forward into a new kind. The hands did their work without telling a lie. They did not erase 3 a.m. They placed it where it belongs, the quiet hinge of the world. In the places where vessels stood, children would visit and put their palms on the skins of those knot bells. If you asked what they felt, they'd say, like when a cat purrs. If you asked what they heard, they'd shrug and hum a note that wasn't taught to them. The remembered kept no leader. They kept a practice. When you hear your name in the quiet, you answer softly, I'm here. And then you listen for the second part, the part that answers back from the other side. We are too. After the last ring, no church returned. None were needed. But some nights, at the corners of streets that never asked for saints, you could see a slender shape at the edge of fog. Barefoot, patient, eyes half closed as if counting without numbers. If you spoke to her, she would not speak back. If you watched her too long, you would remember her from somewhere that had no clock. Call her Anna if you need a name. Call her the bridge if you need a use. The world did not end. It learned. A second way to stay, and in that second way held between the hour that opens and the hour that forgives the last truth of the bell rested. Finally easy. It never rang to summon. It rang to remember with you. When it is quiet, listen. If the silence leans, lean back. If the light along the window turns to a thin breath of gold, stand still. You will not be taken. You will be kept. And somewhere under a hill no map will draw. A hollow room that used to hold a machine holds a gentler thing now. The shape of a woman's hands telling the world it could end something and still be kind. The bell is gone. The bridge remains. And at 3 a.m., the quiet rings just enough to make sure we remember it.